Hey everyone, it's me, Jialian.
And me, Ashley Renee. We're starting today's episode with a shout out to the moms who would do anything for their children's education.
I remember that even in tough times, my mom would always find money for anything related to school. She even walked with me through a tsunami in Taiwan to help me buy a new trombone that I played for 1 year in middle school. Oops, sorry, Mom.
And I remember after a long shift at General Motors, I knew my mom was tired. She probably just wanted to rest. But instead, my after-school activities came first. And she showed up for my 8th grade performance for show choir. And I didn't even have a lead solo. Thank you, Mama.
And we want to start this episode by telling you about a mom who went through even greater lengths for her child's education. Her name is Minnie Liddell, and we're going to go all the way back to the late 1960s.
The Liddells were a black family who lived in North St. Louis City, where black schools were chronically overcrowded and underfunded, compared to white schools in the southern part of the city. Creighton was Minnie's oldest son, and throughout his childhood, he was shuffled from school to school because of overcrowding, with no guarantees that the next school would be any better than the last.
Minnie, along with other black parents, fought for a new school to be opened in their North St. Louis neighborhood. They loved the new neighborhood school, but soon it too became overcrowded. And one day in 1971, Minnie received a letter from the St. Louis Public Schools Board. It said that her first son, Creighton, was being transferred out of the neighborhood school, which she fought so hard to have opened. And he was going to have to go to another all-black school that was so run down it had been condemned.
Minnie was like, no way are you doing that to my kid. She organized her neighbors and over 400 students to protest. The school board yielded and agreed to keep Creighton in the neighborhood school. But she knew that the whole system had to be changed. And on February 18, 1972, she and other African-American parents filed a class action lawsuit against the St. Louis City Board of Education and several officials. The parents asked that St. Louis public schools be operated with equitable funds and resources across race.
So in 1975, the parents and the St. Louis City Board of Education and the officials came to an agreement that avoided busing by saying they'd try to make schools more integrated. But white flight had left few white students in city schools. So city schools tried to attract white students from the county with special schools, or magnet schools, that focused on areas like science and the performing arts.
Magnet schools gave white kids an opportunity for an integrated education, but fewer black kids could take advantage of that.
Linda Lockhart retired from St. Louis Public Radio's newsroom a couple of years ago, where she copy-edited stories and worked on community engagement projects.
But back in the late 1970s, she was a cub reporter at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, working her way up as a black woman in a predominantly white field. And she says white families had little interest in the newly formed magnet schools.
Then they had black teachers going to white schools in South St. Louis and white teachers coming to North St. Louis to what had been predominantly black schools. And so I think that's when it really became, clear to people who didn't have their kids in the schools every day that there was this separation, there was this inequality within this same district that you would think would have, would disperse their funds, their money across the board equally to all schools.
The NAACP got involved. They wanted a busing program similar to what was in place in other parts of the country, and they joined the lawsuit that Minnie and the other parents had filed.
But in 1979, District Judge James Meredith ruled that the St. Louis City School Board didn't intentionally create segregated schools and declined to order busing. The NAACP refused to back down and appealed the decision. And in 1980, the Court of Appeals reversed Meredith's decision. They ruled that the St. Louis City School Board and the State Board of Education were responsible for maintaining a segregated school system and suggested that they develop a city-county student transfer program.
And that September, over 7,500 students boarded buses to desegregate St. Louis City schools. As desegregation progressed, more and more white people left for the suburbs in St. Louis County, and there was pushback from many white families who stayed in the city.
And I kept thinking, these are little children. What are you afraid of? So mostly I'm there to try and do my job and not put my personal feelings into them and just trying to do the best I can in terms of reporting it. But times like that were very difficult.
It was evident that the original goal of integration was not being achieved.
think early on when they began the interdistrict classes, they would take black kids and put them in what had been a white school, but they'd still be in a self-contained classroom. And so their classmates were still all black. There was no sense of integration. There was no diversity, desegregation. Yes, and the white kids still played with the white kids and the black kids still played with the black kids. And so the idea that the only way that things could get better for these children was to send them to schools a long distance away from their homes and then still have them have to put up with racist taunts and negative behavior. It's like all this work for what if the kids are still being harassed and still being treated differently by their classmates, their teachers.
Then in 1981, another district judge took over the case and proposed a regional voluntary desegregation plan, including suburban county districts. When the deadline for response rolled around, only 4 county districts had stepped up.
To get the rest of the suburban school districts to comply, the district judge essentially threatened, if you don't get in on this, I'll merge all of the school districts, city and county, and force you to share resources. And in 1983, all 23 county school districts had approved a voluntary desegregation plan, where being black would be a requirement for city students to go to school in the county. And now, the St. Louis region is 4 decades into the largest continuously running school desegregation program in America. A convincing argument could be made that of all the lines that shape the region we call home, the ones between school districts have the most lasting impact.
Which is why on this episode, we'll share 5 first-hand perspectives on school desegregation through the ages. It's the final part of our mini-season on the institutional divides that create the larger stage for the stories we tell about race in America. And what's revealed is a portrait of a region that has long struggled to ensure every student feels welcome in the classroom. From St. Louis Public Radio and PRX, this is We Live Here, a show for people somewhere on the woke spectrum.
Even after a settlement was reached in 1983 to establish a voluntary desegregation plan for St. Louis city and county schools, the program would face continued legal battles. And we want you to hear from a man who had first-hand experience defending school integration from the inside. His name is Mike Middleton. By nature, he's a soft-spoken man, but there's a sternness in his voice when speaking on civil rights and education. Born in Mississippi in the late 1940s, Middleton was no stranger to racial discrimination. He was a part of the early civil rights movement in the South. After graduating from law school, he prosecuted civil rights cases for the U.S. Department of Justice in the early 1970s.
In 1985, Middleton agreed to join the high-powered NAACP legal team that would defend the program during a series of legal challenges. But from the start, he was conflicted about the merits of St. Louis's massive school integration plan.
We had about 14,000 black kids getting up early in the morning and being transported to, long distances to county schools. And their experience was not all that pleasant. While the districts welcomed them because they managed to secure additional funding and build additional buildings, some of the parents and students out in those districts were not all that pleased with the city kids coming into their districts. Maybe we're giving 14,000 kids an opportunity, if they've got the strength and the resilience to put up with being marginalized in those county schools, maybe we're giving them an opportunity for a better education. But what are we doing for the kids that stay in the city? And it didn't really come to me clearly until Freeman Bosley, who was the mayor of St. Louis at the time, complained to me that we were pretty much taking all the kids who had families that were willing to put their children through the trauma of being transported out to schools where they seemingly weren't welcome, to get a better education. We were taking kids with that kind of family support out of the St. Louis public schools, while in fact he wanted to keep them in the St. Louis public schools to help improve the St. Louis public schools. So the whole idea of integration as the ultimate goal, rather than quality of education being the ultimate goal, was a real problem for me.
Now, I am a DSEG kid. I was the kid who lived in the city, specifically in North St. Louis and South St. Louis, and I was bused out to Lindbergh School District. And me and my mom have had this conversation a number of times, how she really felt that busing the city kids out to the county was a double-edged sword, that we did receive top-notch education, but in the end, ultimately, it not only hurt us as a community, but the areas that we lived in, because funding was taken out of city schools so that they can bus us to the county. What are your thoughts behind that?
You were one of those kids that was a bright kid whose parents wanted to see you be successful and get a good education. Well, that's the kind of family unit and student that the St. Louis public schools, in Freeman's view, needed to keep in the school system, because you could set the example for the rest of the kids and the rest of the families. So rather than take all the bright kids with supportive families and move them out to the county, he wanted to keep them in the city. I don't think that an all-black school is necessarily bad. What I'm suggesting is that an all-black school can be very, very good with appropriate resources and appropriate curriculum, etc. I went to segregated schools as a child in Mississippi, and I think I got a pretty good education, even though the schools were underfunded. I mean, I was lucky in that I had really, really good, committed teachers, and it was in the height of the civil rights movement where everyone was working hard to educate all the kids, and it was a family affair.
As the Liddell versus Board case progressed, Middleton would be involved in ensuring that city schools would receive necessary repairs and other improvements to provide a consistent, proper learning environment for students.
Finally, in 1999, all parties in the Liddell lawsuit reached a new settlement. St. Louis public schools were deemed unified, or no longer segregated, and the desegregation program could continue on a voluntary basis through the 2008-2009 school year. The Voluntary Interdistrict Coordinating Council became a nonprofit corporation and was renamed the Voluntary Interdistrict Choice Corporation, or VIC. For Middleton, the desegregation program wasn't ideal, but he was able to advance necessary changes that would last for generations to come.
Litigation is about compromise, and that's how we handle it.
The settlement would have a profound impact on the lives of tens of thousands of students like Maya Norfleet. Soon after Middleton concluded his time working on the desegregation case, she was getting ready to enter the 6th grade. Like the previous generation, her family faced a difficult decision. They lived in North St. Louis City, but wanted the resources for their daughter that were available in wealthier and whiter suburban schools.
So in 2001, they enrolled her in the desegregation program, and in the fall, she began as a 6th grader at Rockwood Valley Middle School in West St. Louis County. Getting up before dawn would be Maya's new normal.
So from going from Dunbar, which was kindergarten through 5th grade, a block away from my grandma's house, my big mama's house, to 45-minute bus ride. What I can remember from that first bus ride, it was early in the morning, and I was one of the last stops, but it was still super early. So if it was early for me, it was even earlier for other students. At that point, it might have been the most I've been on the highway that wasn't to go out of town.
Even the scenery was a shock.
Like, y'all got deer? Like, you just have deer walking around? Hawks? eagles, like the most we have is squirrels, pigeons, or robin.
And that's when it hit her. Things were going to be different.
I think I was more nervous than scared just because I didn't know, or if maybe it didn't really dawn on me how far I was going to be. I already knew, like, I didn't know anybody on my own bus. Like, a lot of the kids, I didn't have anyone else in my neighborhood getting on that bus with me. It was just me. So I didn't know anyone else on the school bus anyway, let alone, oh, we far. And I really don't know anybody in this building. The problems, at least that I remember, were more what we now know and have the language for of microaggressions, of being like, oh, wow, you did really well, or wow, you were such a great writer. And I'm sitting there like, I know. You right, I am. I didn't play with anybody in my neighborhood. After elementary school, I did not play outside in my own neighborhood. And then also at a certain point then, I literally just don't know nobody in my neighborhood because I didn't spend the last 5-6 hours with them at school. So they be playing. I'm like looking out the window like, oh.
And her friendships with the other Black students at Rockwood Valley Middle School brought new tensions.
It got harder as I started being in more honors classes, because then you're the smart Black kid from the city. And that puts a weird target on you for kids that are dealing and going through stuff, because then you end up getting bullied by everybody. Kids that you just got done riding a school bus with will call you white girl because you enunciate. Learning how to be Black in a not Black space is probably the biggest thing I learned from Deseg. Flat out, it was school of code switching. Sometimes you have to do it. It don't always feel great. Sometimes you barely even notice you're doing it. Man.
Much of the focus on the desegregation program in St. Louis had focused on the impact on the tens of thousands of Black students.
But it's worth remembering that through the years, thousands and thousands of white students also participated in the program, which is why we wanted to hear from Jennifer Putnam. Jennifer grew up in the city and attended St. Louis City Public Schools until the early 90s, when her family moved to Kirkwood, a wealthy, mostly white suburb. At the time, she was attending Enright Classical Junior Academy, a magnet middle school in the city.
And so I was able to finish out that year at the city school, and then my parents made me change to Kirkwood.
Her parents wanted her to give suburban schools a chance, but she quickly began missing her old school and friends from the city.
It was a really, as I remember, a really happy place. Everybody was friends. It was just so different at Kirkwood. At Kirkwood, it was very separate. There were some Black kids, but they were either bus from the city or they came from Meacham Park. And they were kind of together, and the white kids were together. And I felt kind of in between the two cultures, two groups. I couldn't really find my place there.
Her classmates in the county would make off-putting comments about her upbringing in the city.
The kids would ask me things like, I remember someone saying, oh, did you ever see a drive-by shooting? I was like, no, it's not all like that in the city, or just they had some preconceived notions, there's a lot of criminal activity, they thought, or it's a scary place. It made me kind of look down on them. I just thought that they were maybe more sheltered, or maybe their parents had given them a false idea of the city and city living. It felt like I'd been picked up and put in a different world, kind of. Yeah, I think if I had a different colored skin, if I was Black going to Kirkwood, it would have been even harder. It would have been even harder to fit in, I think. And I think I might have felt kind of less than, because my skin shows that I'm coming from a different place, either from this poor neighborhood or, I think I had some privilege because I was white. Coming into this school, I could blend in. They didn't have to, not everyone knew that I came from the city.
Even so, after a year of feeling out of place in the county schools, Jennifer was ready to return to city schools.
The desegregation program gave her the option to live in the county and attend the magnet school she originally attended in the city. She returned to her old stomping grounds at Enright Classical Junior Academy for her last year of middle school in 1992.
Yes, the building was in worse condition, but it felt like such a more warm and welcoming place.
For high school, Jennifer went to Metro Academic and Classical High School, and even though the school had a robust curriculum and extracurricular activities, an exchange program opened her eyes to how much more resources still existed in predominantly white schools in the county. When she and her classmates visited Lindbergh High School in South St. Louis County, they were taken aback.
Just seemed so unfair that we were some of the top achieving students in the district and the state. You know, we came from this school that was really performing well academically, but at the same time, we didn't have the facilities like they had at Lindbergh. And it was like, why do these students deserve better than we had?
Jennifer graduated from Metro Academic Classical High School in 1997. She enrolled at a time when there was the highest demand and enrollment among county students for the desegregation program. Back then, county students were submitting 3 times as many applications as there were open seats. But as time passed, there were fewer and fewer applications from the county, but demand from African American families in the city remained strong, with the program receiving far more applications than there are slots available. And coming up, we'll hear stories from 2 current students in the desegregation program that suggest the attitudes Maya and Jennifer faced haven't changed much through the years.
Janelle Harris is one of the 3,660 black students who live in the city and get up early every morning to attend schools in the suburbs.
I'm 17. I'm a senior at Oakville High School. I live in Tower Grove, South Tower Grove. I like the school that I go to, actually. I don't see anything wrong with it. Like, I'm glad that my parents put me in the district that I am, because without being in the district, I feel like I won't be the person that I am, and won't know how to respond to different things in the world.
But even as a high school senior today, the early morning bus ride from South St. Louis City to South St. Louis County hasn't gotten easier.
I 100% hate having to get up almost 2 hours early before I actually have to do work in school, because I'm extra tired in the morning, and then I can hear other students complaining about, I have to get up at 6 o'clock. I have to get up at 5 o'clock every day, and school doesn't start till 7. So I personally do not like it whatsoever.
And even worse than that is the way she's received at school. In 6th grade, she had to come to terms with how race affected the way her white peers treated her.
Different personalities. I guess as the white kids got older, they started listening to their parents, and probably their parents had some sort of impact on how they saw us black kids or something. So you can see a personality change. You can definitely see who stops talking to you, who just doesn't want to be friends with you anymore. It's a big personality change. I mean, I've had a few friends that were friends with in elementary school and middle school, and then we got to high school and it completely changed. I wouldn't necessarily say it's because I was black, but there are different friend groups that I know that I was friends with before, and I'm probably the only black one out of them, and it just changed completely. I don't know if it's because all of this stuff that's happening in the world now, or that I'm actually speaking my mind and have a different opinion on everything that's happening and they don't agree with it or something. So that could be a possible impact. I've noticed a difference. It's kind of like a stereotype. There can be situations where a white girl, she's doing something that she's not supposed to be doing, then all of a sudden a white kid will come up, oh yeah, Janelle would beat her. Why would you say me just because I'm black? You think I can automatically beat someone up just because I'm black? And that really offends me, and I don't think they understand how much that kind of offends me. I feel like there's just not going to be any difference if I say anything, which is kind of bad to think. I remember there's these people that came in for a presentation, and it was about how they're trying to combine the city and the county together. So I had my opinion on it, and I honestly didn't think that it was a bad idea. But there was this one girl in my class, and she was like, no, the city's trash. All they're going to do is just trash the county, blah, blah, blah. We were friends before that. Then after that, I've never talked to her again.
In hindsight, if Janelle could choose whether or not she would want to enroll in the desegregation program,
I'd say I'd choose to go to school in my neighborhood because just to have a different scenery and different peers around me and to see like how these kids act compared to the kids that I go to school with now.
this May, Janelle will graduate from Oakville High School in the Melville School District in South St. Louis County, a district which had a student population that was around 80% white during this school year. After graduation, she will attend Missouri Western University.
Even though the amount of white students from the county enrolled in city schools has never really been enough to achieve the original goal of integration, Joey Johnson is among the 138 white students living in the county who are currently enrolled in city magnet schools.
He grew up in Illinois before his family moved to Oakville, the mostly white suburb in South St. Louis County where Janelle went to high school. His mother, Grace, grew up in a neighborhood in Belleville, Illinois that was more racially and economically diverse than Oakville, and she wanted Joey to be educated in a diverse school that would also challenge him academically. Then, she was driving along the highway when she saw a sign advertising McKinley Classical Leadership Academy, a high-performing magnet school. She did her research, attended all the open houses, and had a conversation with Joey, where he agreed to enroll in the desegregation program.
I have been in city schools since 6th grade, so that would be 4.5 years.
If Joey had not enrolled in the desegregation program, he would have been educated in the Melville School District like Janelle.
And he says some white parents who sent their children to Melville schools openly expressed opposition to black children from the city being able to go to county schools.
I remember my friends' parents not being so happy about it. They were talking about it and they said, we don't want them here. They can have their own school where they are. And I disagree with that personally, but there was a lot of people who were totally against it and didn't think that it was right that these people who were paying less taxes than we were coming to our schools and getting the same education that we were. But I thought that it was a good opportunity for them, and it was a good opportunity for us to see like different perspectives of life like I have.
McKinley Classical Leadership Academy is known for its stellar academic outcomes.
But Joey vividly remembers his first day at McKinley for reasons other than academics.
I remember walking in and seeing metal detectors and being like, what the heck is this? I've never seen this before. And having to put my backpack on the counter and have an officer, like a police officer, go through my stuff. And that was a different experience for me, definitely. I was in the shell for maybe a week or two, but I know my first couple of friends were black and mixed. I didn't make white friends, but that was probably later on. I think it was harder to make white friends than it was to make black friends at McKinley. Because a lot of the white people did have like this little tight-knit community that I was like breaking into. I did eventually become their friends and a lot more people's friends.
And even though he learned to make friends in a diverse setting, Joey sometimes felt excluded. So his parents gave him the option to go to the schools he would have attended, back in the mostly white Melville School District.
I didn't want to go through that because I had left and I was leaving for good. I wasn't going to come back. So I knew I don't want to say stuck, but I was stuck in the situation that I was in. And I think it ended up making me a better person.
His decision to continue attending city schools has taught him profound lessons about how racial divides between St. Louis City and county persist today.
The gap between city and county perspectives on race was further emphasized when Michael Brown Jr. was killed by a Ferguson police officer in 2014.
We didn't talk about it that much at school, but I do remember very different conversations happening where I was. In South County, I'd hear people saying like they were against the protests and they weren't for it at all. Whereas in the city, everybody was for it. If you were in the city, it was just assumed that you were for the protests and what happened was wrong. So I saw a lot of perspectives on that issue, even as an 11-year-old. I wasn't a part of those conversations, but I definitely heard them. I felt like I needed to hide my thoughts sometimes, like what I felt in it, because when I was in the county, if I would have like stated what I believed, I would have probably like gotten like attacked. Like people would not have liked what I thought on the issue. And in the city, I felt like I was a county boy. People didn't see me as somebody who could have an opinion on this. And so I always just kept everything inside.
But now that Joey is older, he finally feels comfortable sharing what he thought at the time.
Well, if I went to a predominantly white school, I wasn't seeing who was being affected. I was just seeing outside opinions on it. And when I went to this city school, I saw the people that were affected and how they were affected by it.
Joey has come a long way from the shy sixth grader who stepped through city school doors for the first time.
I think that if sixth grade me knew what was going to happen, sixth grade me would have said no. But now that I've seen everything that's happened and how everything's worked out for the better, how I've gotten more opportunities, definitely yes. It's no doubt that I would rather go to a city school than where I would have gone. I've learned just seeing different perspectives, like I've said before, persistence, individualism, definitely.
Maya, Jennifer, Janelle, and Joey were given a choice to stay in the school system they were in or be educated elsewhere, a choice that continues to define who they are today and impacts educational outcomes for past and present students of the program for years to come.
Researchers at the University of Missouri-Columbia studied academic records between 2014 and 2017. They found that Black students in the program were more likely to graduate from high school, less likely to drop out, and had higher ACT scores. But there are lingering questions about the toll the desegregation program has had on neighborhoods in the city, and whether or not the outcomes in city schools would be just as good if they had the resources available to schools in the suburbs.
While these questions are difficult to answer completely, one thing is certain. This chapter of St. Louis's long story of school desegregation is coming to an end in 2032. For now, there is no replacement plan, and because of U.S. Supreme Court decision in 2007, future programs can't be based on students' race. Rather, they have to be based on socioeconomic status.
This show is produced by me, Jalian.
And me, Ashley Renee. Lauren Brown is our associate producer, and we want to thank several people for helping us with the research for this episode. Alan Medlock, archivist at the State Historical Society of Missouri, Brent Jones, data visualization specialist for St. Louis Public Radio, and Cheryl Matkins and Lori Marlowe, staff at the Voluntary Interdistrict Choice Corporation.
Research for this episode also came from coverage by St. Louis Public Radio and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on the desegregation program, as well as St. Louis School Desegregation, Patterns of Progress and Peril by Hope C. Rias. We highly recommend them as resources for learning more. Our show is overseen by Tim Lloyd, senior producer of On Demand and Content Partnerships, and Robert Peterson, the director of radio programming and operations. From St. Louis Public Radio and PRX, this is We Live Here.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.